You've been told about noble knights, about valiant warriors in shining armor, defending the weak and fighting for honor. A beautiful fairy tale, isn't it? But what if this fairy tale hides something greater? What if behind the romantic image of chivalry lurks one of the strangest mysteries in human history? Historians repeat the same rehearsed phrases. Knights were the elite. They trained from childhood. Their physical preparation allowed them to wear heavy armor. Sounds convincing until you start asking simple questions, until you encounter obvious contradictions that official science prefers to sidestep. Here's a simple fact. Modern reenactors, clad in exact replicas of medieval armor, last in them for a maximum of several hours. 3 hours, 4 hours in good weather, and a person literally collapses from exhaustion. Overheating, dehydration, skin rub bloody, dizziness. These are people engaged in physical training, trained enthusiasts, and they cannot spend even half a day in armor. Yet medieval knights, according to chronicles, wore their plate armor for days, for weeks, slept in them, ate in them, fought for hours on end without removing a single plate. How is this possible? Where's the logic? Where's basic biology? Metal rubs skin to bloody wounds. The body under layers of iron and fabric turns into an oven. The temperature inside the armor rises to critical levels. Mobility is limited to such an extent that every movement requires effort. Sweat doesn't evaporate, accumulates, creates a moist environment for infections. After several hours, a person loses the ability to think clearly. Coordination is disrupted. Physical destruction of the organism begins. But historians continue repeating their formulations. They got used to it. They trained from youth. Their organisms adapted. Empty words instead of real explanations. Incantations instead of science. Perhaps it's time to admit the obvious. Perhaps something in the very foundation of our understanding of knighthood is wrong. What if those who wore armor were not quite what we take them for? Block 1. The absurdity of knightly traditions and rules of combat. Let's delve into the rules of medieval warfare. More precisely, into the madness that these rules represented. Imagine, two armies converge on a battlefield, thousands of warriors on each side, infantry, archers, cavalry, and suddenly in the skirmish, one single knight dies. Just one. And what happens? The entire army he was fighting for admits defeat. Just like that. Immediately. Warriors lay down their weapons and switch to the victor's side, as if they were fighting not for their king, not for their land, not for an idea, but for a specific person in an iron shell. Is this how living people wage war? Is this how human psychology works? An army doesn't surrender because of the death of one fighter, however important he might be. Soldiers continue fighting, avenge the fallen, double their efforts. But no, in medieval battles, completely different logic operated. Logic that cannot be explained by human motives. And an even stranger rule: a knight could not be touched by a common warrior. Only another knight had the right to capture a knight. Imagine the absurdity of the situation. 10 infantrymen surround an armored horseman, knock him off his horse, throw him to the ground, but cannot take him prisoner. They must wait until another knight appears who will perform the act of capture. Why? What's the point? Official history explains this as a code of honor, estate traditions. But let's think logically. If a knight is simply a well-trained and equipped warrior, why does a taboo exist against touching him? Why did common people, who could slaughter his fellow infantrymen without any ceremony, fear even touching the iron figure? Fear. Instinctive, deep fear. That's what reads between the lines of the chronicles. Not respect, not reverence, precisely fear, as if something was hidden under the armor that was dangerous to touch. Later in the 14th and 15th centuries, knights began to be replaced by banners. A new tradition appeared. The loss of a battle standard meant the army's defeat. The same rules, the same absurdity, only instead of a figure encased in metal, they now used a piece of cloth on a pole. As if the system was gradually degrading, losing its true meaning, turning into an empty ritual. And the battles of the knights themselves? That's a whole other story. Chronicles describe duels lasting hours, sometimes days. Two warriors encased in plate armor, battle each other while their armies stand around and watch. Just watch. Don't help, don't attack, don't perform flanking maneuvers. They wait for the outcome of the clash between two metallic figures. Where's the tactics? Where's military art? Where's at least elementary common sense? Is this how people who value their lives wage war? Armies simply observed as two beings in armor methodically pounded each other until one fell. And after that, yes, again, the same thing, the losing side admitted defeat. Perhaps these duels were not battles in the usual sense. Perhaps something else was happening. A ritual, a test, a verification, a clash of certain entities that determined the fate of entire armies. Block 2. The impossibility of a knight's daily life. Now about daily life, about the everyday existence of those we call knights. Historians claim knights wore armor almost constantly, not only in battle, not only at tournaments, but also in ordinary life, in castles, at feasts, during travels. The plate armor was rarely removed, only for sleep, and sometimes, according to some sources, they even slept in armor. Modern experiments show the complete impossibility of such a way of life. Groups of reenactors tried to reproduce the conditions of existence of a medieval knight. The result? Overheating occurs within 2 to 3 hours. Dehydration begins even faster. After 4 to 5 hours, a person is on the verge of physical exhaustion. After 6 hours, medical assistance is required. And what do the chronicles tell us? Knights spent days and nights in armor, traveled for weeks without removing their plate armor, participated in crusades, crossing deserts and mountains in full vestments. Historians offer an explanation. Knights cooled themselves by pouring water through the slits in their helmets. Sounds reasonable? Think again. A moist environment under metal, ideal conditions for fungal infections, bacteria, tissue rot. After several days of such cooling, the skin would be covered with ulcers. After a week, sepsis would begin. This isn't a survival method. This is a method of slow, agonizing death. But suppose they somehow manage the overheating. What about sleep? Medieval castles, gloomy stone boxes, narrow rooms, cold walls, minimal furniture. Chronicles and engravings often depict knights sleeping standing up, leaning against a wall, in full armor, standing all night. Ask yourself a simple question. Can you fully rest by standing at a wall for 8 hours, even without 20 to 30 kilograms of metal on your body? Human physiology requires a horizontal position for deep sleep. Muscles must relax, the spine unload, internal organs redistribute pressure. Standing, this is impossible. You can doze off for half an hour, but not restore strength after a whole day in armor. And they slept like this night after night, week after week, for years, or didn't sleep at all. What if those who wore armor simply didn't need rest? What if sleep, like food, like drink, were not necessities for them? What if something existed under the metal according to different laws? Block 3. Inhuman appearance and behavior. Look at medieval engravings and miniatures. Not at late romantic paintings, not at modern reconstructions, but at authentic images created by contemporaries of the events. Knights in these images look strange. They are completely encased in metal, without gaps, without exposed areas of skin. No face, only a smooth or decorated surface of the helmet. No hands, only metal gloves. No human features at all, just a shell, an iron form in the shape of a human. Were medieval artists primitive? Couldn't they properly depict armor? Perhaps, or perhaps they drew exactly what they saw. Beings without faces, figures without signs of life inside, moving constructions of metal. Historians explain everything simply. Training, strength of spirit, habit. Knights prepared from childhood for life in armor, so their bodies adapted. Beautiful theory, except biology doesn't work the way historians would like. Friction of metal against skin doesn't disappear from training. Sweat doesn't stop being released from willpower. Blood from chafed wounds doesn't stop flowing from habit. After several days of constant armor wearing, a human body turns into a mess of inflamed tissues, purulent ulcers, and open wounds. Infection is inevitable. Blood poisoning is a matter of time. But knights wore plate armor for months, without breaks, without consequences. And now think about this. If knights really were ordinary people, if the medieval crowd knew that under the metal hid the same flesh and blood as theirs, wouldn't they have torn these noble warriors to pieces at the first opportunity? The Middle Ages were not a time of respect for elites. This was an era of brutal uprisings when peasants with pitchforks went against armored horsemen, an era when hatred of lords boiled in every village, and yet veneration, submission, fear even to touch a fallen knight. Not respect, precisely fear, instinctive, animal, inexplicable. Perhaps this fear was justified. Perhaps people felt at the level of instincts what they could not explain with reason. Perhaps something was hidden under the armor that evoked primordial horror, something that should not exist according to the laws of nature. Figures encased in metal without faces, without signs of fatigue, without need for sleep. Beings whose death decided the outcome of battles. Warriors whom people feared to touch. Shells inside which could be anything, or no one. And what if the armor itself was the entity? What if the metal shell didn't protect someone inside, but itself represented something, acting, moving, fighting? Questions multiply, anomalies accumulate. Official explanations crumble under closer examination. And somewhere in the depths of medieval chronicles, between the lines of pious descriptions of valiant knights, a completely different picture emerges, a picture that historians prefer not to notice. But we will notice. We will ask uncomfortable questions. We will gather facts that don't fit into the beautiful legend, and perhaps we'll uncover one of the most shocking secrets of the human past. Block 4, Armor Construction, Not for Humans. Now let's turn to the armor itself, to its construction, to the details that official history prefers to pass over in silence. Let's start with helmets. Take any museum specimen of a classic knightly helmet from the 13th to 14th century. Carefully examine the throat opening, the place through which supposedly the knight pushed his head. Measure it. Try to imagine how a human head passes through this opening. It doesn't. Modern reenactors know this problem. Many museum helmets are physically impossible to put on the head of an adult man. The throat opening is too narrow. You can try to squeeze through, risking damage to the ears. You can grease your head with oil. But a medieval warrior clearly didn't engage in such procedures before each donning of armor. Historians explain, helmets deformed over time, metal contracted, openings decreased. Convenient explanation. Except metal doesn't work that way. Iron and steel expand during corrosion, not contract. Rust occupies a larger volume than the original metal. If the helmet deformed over centuries, the openings should have become larger, not smaller. So perhaps the head wasn't supposed to pass through there? Moving on, strange little plates near the ears on many helmets. Round metal discs protruding to the sides. Historians call them decorative elements or attachment details. But think, in combat, these protrusions are an ideal target. You can catch them with a weapon, hand, rope. One jerk, and the helmet is torn from the head. The neck is open for a strike. What sensible weaponsmith would create such a vulnerability? But what if it's not a vulnerability? What if these elements perform some other function? A function we no longer understand because we don't know the true purpose of the construction? Shoulder plates. Massive metal pauldrons on knightly armor from the 14th to 15th centuries. Try to raise your arm forward in them. Try to make a natural movement. Extend your arm for a strike with a sword, spear, fist. Can't do it. The plates block movement. The arm can move only in a limited range, up and down along the body, but not forward. For a human, this is catastrophic. A warrior who cannot deliver a direct strike is useless in combat. But armor was created exactly this way, purposefully. Weaponsmiths who spent years perfecting their craft made the same mistake over and over again. Or was it not a mistake? Or did the movements of what was inside the armor obey different biomechanics? Boots. Metal boots of knightly armor often have no heel part. The back part of the foot literally hangs in the air. The leg rests only on the toe and the balls of the feet. Try standing like this for several minutes. Your calves will cramp. Try walking even 100 steps. Your feet will become a source of pain. And knights in such boots walked for miles, fought for hours, stood guard for knights. A human cannot do this. Physiology doesn't allow it. But what if there was no human inside the metal shell? Late armor, from the 15th to 16th centuries, demonstrates another strangeness. Small doors appear on the calf parts, hinge flaps without visible function, too small to put the armor on the leg through them, too inconveniently located to serve for ventilation. They just exist, as if craftsmen were copying ancient samples, no longer understanding their purpose, as if reproducing details whose meaning had been lost. In general, late armor produces a strange impression. Manufacturing quality declines. Proportions are violated. Details are simplified or complicated without logic. The impression is created that 16th century weaponsmiths worked from blueprints they didn't understand, copied forms without knowing their true function, reproduced a construction created for something else, not for the human body. And perhaps that's exactly how it was? Perhaps the original armor of the 12th to 13th centuries was created not by humans and not for humans. And later craftsmen merely imitated ancient samples, turning a functional construction into meaningless imitation? Questions, again questions, and not a single intelligible answer from official history. Block 5. Evidence from chronicles. Now let's turn to written sources, to medieval chronicles that historians usually cite selectively, omitting inconvenient fragments. Knights continuing to fight after decapitation. These are not legends, not tales told around a campfire. These are descriptions from official chronicles compiled by monks and court chroniclers. Serious documents in which real events were recorded. Engravings from the 10th to 11th centuries sometimes depict astonishing scenes. A body in armor without a head continues to move, waves a sword, delivers strikes. Nearby lies a severed head and a helmet, but the metal figure is still active. And only when it is pried out of the plate armor, only then does movement cease. One could attribute this to artistic exaggeration, to symbolism, to a desire to emphasize the valor of a fallen warrior. But there are too many such images. Too many independent sources describe similar situations. A chronicle of the battle at... Stop. Let's not name specific places and dates. Details are easy to verify and refute. Let's just say several chronicles from the 12th century describe how a decapitated knight continued to fight. One source claims that a headless body struck 3 times with a sword before collapsing. Another describes how a figure encased in plate armor without a head rushed around the battlefield until it was surrounded and neutralized by disassembling the armor. Pay attention to the formulations. Not finished off, not killed, but precisely neutralized, disassembled, pried out of the plate armor, as if it were not about killing a living creature, but about deactivating a mechanism, about destroying a construction. The Crusades left especially many strange testimonies. European chroniclers describe Saracen warriors who continued to fight with wounds incompatible with life. Arabic sources responded in kind, called Frankish knights iron demons who knew no pain and did not bleed. One could explain this as propaganda. Each side attributed supernatural qualities to the enemy to justify their defeats. But here's what's interesting. The descriptions are too similar, too specific, and most importantly, both sides describe the same phenomenon. Warriors in armor who behaved not like living people. Europeans write about Saracens without bleeding. Arabs write about Franks without pain. Different cultures, different languages, different religions, but identical observations. As if both sides encountered something that didn't fit their understanding of the world, and both tried to explain it, each in their own terms. Iron demons, that's what Arabic chroniclers called European knights. Not brave warriors, not worthy opponents, precisely demons, beings made of iron, devoid of human nature. And European sources describe opponents who continued to attack even with a sword piercing their chest, who did not cry out in pain, who fell only when they were cut to pieces. Both sides, Christians and Muslims, Europeans and Arabs, people of completely different cultures, independently came to the same conclusion. Those who hide in armor are not ordinary people. Coincidence? Mass hallucination? Or evidence of something real? Final conclusion. The shocking picture. Let's bring all the facts together. Create a general picture from scattered fragments. Knights violated the laws of biology, wore heavy armor for days and weeks without interruption, didn't sleep or slept standing, which is physiologically impossible for full recovery, didn't experience overheating and dehydration that kill modern reenactors in several hours. Knights violated the laws of physics, fought in armor whose construction blocks natural movements of the human body, walked for miles in boots without heel support, put on helmets with openings too narrow for a human head. Knights violated the laws of common sense, participated in battles where the death of one warrior encased in plate armor meant the defeat of an entire army, fought according to rules that make no sense from the standpoint of military tactics, evoked instinctive fear in common people, fear that compelled them not to touch even a defeated opponent. Knights fought for days without rest, continued to move even after decapitation, did not bleed from wounds incompatible with life. Their death was described not as the death of a living being, but as destruction, neutralization, deactivation of a construction. Armor designed not for the human body, narrow throat openings, useless protrusions creating vulnerability, shoulder plates blocking movements, boots without heel support, strange doors on the calves of late samples whose purpose is unclear. Late craftsmen copied ancient samples without understanding their function. Quality declined. Details were distorted. Proportions were violated, as if the original construction was created by someone who knew its true purpose, and followers merely blindly reproduced the form, having lost the essence. The death of a knight instantly decided the outcome of battle, as if he was not just an elite fighter, but a key element of some system, as if his presence on the battlefield determined something greater than military advantage, as if without him the entire army lost its meaning of existence and switched to the victor, as if switching to another mode of operation. Medieval miniatures depict faceless metal figures, not people in armor, precisely figures, shells without signs of life inside, moving constructions externally similar to a human, but devoid of human essence. Chronicles describe the death of a knight as a ritual. It's not enough to simply kill, you need to neutralize. Pry out of the plate armor. Disassemble the armor. As if precisely the armor was the entity, as if the metal shell itself represented something acting, rather than protecting someone inside. What was hidden under the plate armor? Official history answers. Warriors trained from childhood, people whose strength of spirit and training allowed them to overcome physical limitations. But the facts say otherwise. The facts say that something else was hidden under the plate armor, something not needing sleep, not experiencing pain, not bleeding, something capable of continuing to act even without a head, something whose death instantly changed the balance of forces on the battlefield. Mechanical constructions? Automatons created by lost technology? Perhaps. Medieval legends are full of mentions of mechanical knights, of magical armor, of enchanted plate armor. What if reality was hidden behind these fairy tales? What if someone in the 12th to 13th centuries possessed knowledge allowing the creation of moving metal constructions? Knowledge that was lost or deliberately hidden? Or beings of another nature? Non-human entities clothed in metal? Demons, as the Arabs called them? Creatures from another world, bound to an iron shell, summoned or awakened, serving those who knew the right rituals? We don't know the answer, but we know that the official version doesn't work. Too many contradictions, too many unexplainable details, too much evidence that historians prefer to ignore. The history of knighthood is not simply the history of the military elite of medieval Europe. This is one of the strangest and most mysterious pages of the human past. A page that someone tried very hard to rewrite, turning disturbing reality into romantic legend. But truth seeps through the centuries, in the details of armor construction, in the formulations of chronicles, in images on medieval miniatures, in rules of combat that make no sense, in the fear of common people to touch a figure encased in metal. Truth is somewhere nearby, hidden, forgotten, declared superstition and fiction, but still accessible to those who are ready to ask uncomfortable questions, to those who are not satisfied with rehearsed formulations, to those who see obvious contradictions and demand explanations. Knights were not what they're made out to be. Armor did not hide noble defenders. Under the metal was something else, something that violated the laws of nature, something that modern science prefers not to notice. And perhaps, just perhaps, this something still exists somewhere, in forgotten basements of old castles, in secret storage rooms of museums, in places where ordinary people are not allowed, waiting for its hour, waiting for someone to again learn the ancient rituals, again speak the right words, again awaken what sleeps in an iron shell. History does not end. It merely hides, waiting for those who dare to reopen its strange pages.